Hey, how's it going, folks? This is Hellbent, and welcome to AutoHotkey mini tutorial number 32. In this one, I'm going to show you how to create a GUI that'll allow you to set presets. So, for example, if you have a whole bunch of radio buttons and checkboxes, etc., edit fields, drop-down lists, etc., perhaps you might want to have a number of presets. So, if you click on one thing, it'll select set amount of checkboxes, radios, and everything else, not so that way it's ready to go. There's multiple ways that you can implement it. I'm going to just use a couple of radio buttons, so we'll have like 3 presets, one with no preset, another one with one preset, and another one with another preset. But you can also do it with you can create like a drop-down list of all different kinds of presets that you have, or you can have I don't know, however you want to do it. I'm just going to show you how you need to set everything up. We're also not going to worry about what the script does, so this script is going to do absolutely nothing. So you should know how to already at least make a program that when you select a checkbox or all these other things, when you press the button to run the script, you already know how to make it go. This is just way of setting up the presets, so that way you don't have every time you run the program, you don't have to go through everything and manually select this checkbox, that checkbox, add info to this edit field, etc. This one's going to be probably a fairly long one. We're looking at probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 lines of code, just so that way we can get a number of controls out, and we're not going to be doing too many options with certain things, but let's just jump into it. I already have my script set up. I have a new script. I've added my single instance force. I've added my return to get out of the auto execute area. I've added GUI close and my exit hotkey. Other than that, we're going to be coding from scratch. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my GUI and give it some options. So the only option I need is just always on top, so that way it stays on top. I'll do GUI color to set the background color to a black color, and I'll do GUI font technically I don't need to type in that one, but it's a good habit for you guys to see this over and over and over again, so you know what's going on. I'm just going to change the color to white for now, and I'll set the size to 12, but I'll leave everything else by its defaults. So I got a font. I got, I like to have uppercase. Okay, so I got always on top. I have a black background, and I have font color and size. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry about the spacing, so I don't care if the GUI looks good or anything. If you've built a lot of GUIs, you know that it can be a pain in the butt to actually program all this stuff out to get it to look nice and everything, all the positioning done right. So I'm not going to care too much about that. So the first thing I'm going to add is my way of controlling how to select my presets. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a couple of radio buttons. Like I said, you could use drop-down list or etc., etc. Also, your GUI, maybe you want to have different sections, so you'll have a bunch of different presets. So like you'll have presets for this section, so maybe this section has like 50 checkboxes, so it does that, and then you have maybe something else has maybe a bunch of checkboxes and maybe some drop-down lists or whatever. So you can have multiple presets within the same script or within the same GUI, but we're just going to be doing it with one for everything. So I'm going to add a couple of radio buttons, and like I said, I'm just going to position them without too much care. Yeah, I'm not going to care about their positioning or sizing. I'm going to set this as the beginning of a new group, and I'm going to make this one here checked, and I'm going to call this rad. No, I'll call it preset. And I'm going to go to, how about update preset, whatever. I can call it whatever I want. So that's my label that's going to do, when I select the radio, it's going to be the thing that actually executes updating the presets. So I'll just come down here and create that right away. Update preset. Okay, and the first preset I'm going to have is none. So this is the thing that's going to be set by default. Radio buttons, if you're not familiar with them, you shouldn't be taking this lesson, but you should be taking the radio button lesson. But anyways, a radio button is just, you can select one of them. So they'll be in a group, and if I select one, all the other ones in that group are deselected. So I can only have one thing selected at a time. So I'm going to have three. One for no presets, another one for preset 1, and another one for preset 2. So I'm just going to add in the other 2 radio buttons, and I'm just going to position them beside the other one. I'm going to have them all share the same variable, so it's going to, instead of being, each one having a 0 or a 1, it's just going to have a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or a 3. But I need to attach them to the same label. Once again, this is stuff that I have covered in other tutorials, so this part I'm just glossing over. The important stuff that I haven't really covered much before, or that's pertinent to this, I'll spend a little bit more time talking about what's going on. I'll call this set 1. And I'm going to duplicate that because it's pretty much going to be the exact same, except set 2. The last thing I'll do before we get a test going is I'll just show the GUI. And do one more thing after that. GUI 1, show. I'm going to let it size itself, so I don't need anything else there. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that all the variables that I use, as soon as I run this, as soon as it builds the GUI, all the associated variables get their updated beginning values. So to do that, I'm just going to do GUI submit, no hide. So as soon as I run this, if a thing has a variable, so like the radio buttons, they all need to have a value. They need a 0 or a 1, so I'm going to make sure they all have that. And then down here, we should see a tooltip. So here we go, we got a GUI. If I select this, I should see a here. If I select this, I should see a here. If I select this, I should see a here. Okay, so we know that it's executing the label, so the first thing we're going to do inside of the label is we need to make sure that we update the value. So right now, even though it's executing into here, we can't tell which one of these radio buttons has been selected. So I'm just going to use submit to update it, but I could use GUI control get, but I'll just use submit. So GUI 1 submit. No hide. So whichever radio button is currently selected, I'm going to get the value for it, and it's going to be either a 1, 2, or 3 I'll have. So I'm going to set up some conditions. I'm going to say if the variable I have is called preset, if preset equals 1, do this stuff. Oops. Else if preset equals 2, do this stuff. And last, else, I could just say else, but I'll say else if preset equals 3, we'll do this stuff. The last thing I'm going to do is, even though I'm going to be updating through this preset thing, even though I'm going to be updating the GUI to make it look like this is selected, this has text, this blah blah blah, right? They don't, just by doing that, they don't necessarily, the variables that are associated with those controls don't necessarily get those values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit. I'm going to use GUI submit again. this will become a little bit more clear about what I'm talking about in a few minutes when we get the rest of the pieces built into it. So I have my radio buttons. The next thing I'll do is I'll just start adding in some controls. So let's start with some check boxes. So like I said, I'm just going to pick a bunch of different random controls, and we'll look at how we actually set them to be checked or unchecked programmatically. So checkbox. Actually, you know what? I'll do about 5 or 6 of them. So I'll do about 6 of them. So I'll put it in a loop. I'll loop it 6 times. You know what? It'll be quicker and easier for me to just do 2 double loops. So what I'm gonna do is No, I'm not going to do it in loops because it'll take too much code. It'll confuse things. So I'm just going to duplicate. I'm going to do. Let me bring that back. I'm a little bit tired, so I don't want to think about. Like, there's a bunch of things that I would have to do. Like, if the index is 1, then I want it to be x at the x margin, and then if it's not 1, I want it to move over a little bit beside the other control, and then if the index is 4, I want it to be back at the margin, and if it's 5 or 6, I want it to add to the previous x position. So it's easier for you to follow along if I just do it. This is x10. Y is going to be wherever it wants to be. Width is going to be wherever it wants to be. I need a variable, so I'm gonna set this up so that way I can loop through it later using the index number. So I'm gonna, each one of these checkboxes I'm gonna call check underscore, and then this is gonna be 1, and then 2, 3, 4. So I can use an index later. I can use a index later to reference those different checkboxes. So checkbox 1. I'm not going to bother attaching this to a label that's going to submit its values or anything like that, because that's not part of this demonstration. You should already know how to use a checkbox. This is more about just doing the presets. So I'm going to leave that as that, and I'm going to put some text on this. Check 1. I'm going to duplicate this, except it's going to be at x plus 10. It's going to be checkbox 2 and check 2, and I'm going to duplicate that. And it's going to be checkbox 3, 3. And then I'll just copy all of this and do the same thing. The first one's going to be back at the X margin. This is going to be number 4. Number 4. This is going to be beside that one. And number 5. Number 5. Beside that one. Number 6. Number 6. Okay. There we go. So we have some check boxes now. Okay, so we got some radio buttons, we got some check boxes. Let's go ahead and add a couple more radio buttons. So we'll create 2 groups of radio buttons. Let's just do 1. You'll get the point. 1. We'll add it. So the first this radio group is how we're going to be selecting our other stuff, our presets, but this next one that I'm going to add in, it's going to be part of the presets, or the preset options. So add radio x10. I'm gonna do it the same way I did the other one, where I'm making this a group. I'm gonna have the first one checked by default, and I can only associate 1 radio with them, and this is just going to be radio rad. It's just going to be radio. Yeah, I'm gonna use only one variable for them all. So instead of it being each one has a 0 or 1 value, the group's gonna have a value of 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on which radio is selected. So if the first radio is selected, the value is 1 for that variable. If the second radio is selected, rad will equal 2, and if the third one is selected, rad will equal 3, rather than the other way where each one has its own variable and then each variable has a value of 0 or 1. Rad 1, I'm just going to duplicate that line. I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I can get rid of this too. So this is going to be x plus 10, and this is radio 2. I'm going to duplicate x plus 10, radio 3. Okay, so we got some check boxes, we got some radio buttons. Let's go ahead and have a look at those. Make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, I know it's starting to get a little bit messy, but like I said, you can deal with putting group boxes around it, organizing it. Let's go ahead and add in a drop-down list. So DDL for drop-down list, position it at X10. I'll give it a width of 200. I'll make it 4 rows. I'll add 4 options to it, and I'm gonna call it list 1. Variable list 1. And once again, I'm not going to be attaching these to any labels that do anything. This program isn't going to do anything at all. It's just about selecting the things. The list is going to be option 1. Very original ideas here. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, just leave a comment down below. I mean, I'm sure most of you will be able to pick this stuff up pretty easily, but if not, just ask away. Okay, so I've created a drop-down list now, and the list, I've set it so that way the first item in that list gets selected automatically, and it's the options in that drop-down list are option 1, option 2, option 3, and option 4. And I'm going to use the actual string to hold its value. So here's my drop-down list: option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. Okay. Next, I'll add in a list box, and there's a couple of things I'll do something else after, because there's a few ways that you can use a list box that makes it pretty cool. But I'll cover those separately near the end. Hopefully, just remind me. List box. I'll set it to X10, a width of 200. Row, I'll make it 5 rows, so I'll give it 5 options. I'm going to call this, the variable associated with is list2. And once again, if you're familiar with all the drop-down list and the list box, you can use objects or arrays to hold these objects, so you don't have to, these lists, so you don't have to put them in your GUI, because if it's if you have like a lot of items in here, you're not going to want to have it sitting here in your GUI. You might want to have it in a variable up at the top or something. But I'm going to call this list 2, and I'll just say it's number 1. These are its options: number 2, number 3, 4, 5. Alright, so there we go. We now have a list box, and I need to change the font color. So I'm going to grab that font. I'm going to grab this line up here, and I'm going to drag it down to here, and I'm going to change the color from white to black. And there we go. So now we have a drop-down list, and we have a list box. The last thing yeah, I guess it'll be the last thing. The last thing I'm going to add is a couple of edit boxes, because you can do this for edit boxes. You can have default things that automatically get filled out into your edit boxes. Edit. In fact, you can hide some controls, show some controls, etc., etc. In fact, I think I did a sort of way of doing that during the, I don't remember which tutorial number it was, but it was about reading and writing to a file. So the GUI mini tutorial that deals with that, it had, you know, disabling some controls, enabling some controls, etc., etc. Edit, I'm going to set this to X10, width of 200. Once again, I don't really care about the information it has. I'm going to call this edit 1, and I'm not going to put anything in it. I'm just going to duplicate this, and this is going to be edit 2. So there we go, we got 2 edit boxes. Okay. 2 edit boxes. Okay, I think we have enough to create a preset now. So there's lots of different ways that we can do this, or ways that we can approach this. For instance, let's say with the cases of our edit box, if we select one of these presets, perhaps we have a bunch of, if we're having a bunch of edits controls or text controls that we want to have put fill in with certain information, we can create an array or something like that. So let's say I'll do one of the edit boxes with just a simple array. And it's just going to have 2 items in it, so really nothing. Item 1, and I'm just doing this to give you some ideas. It's not for that this is some profound thing that I'm going to be putting into it. It's just to give you ideas of ways that you can approach it. So item 1, item 2, and the other one I'll just manually have it update. So with the list box, there's something that we might have to do later on, but for now we're going to approach this that if we select one of these radio buttons, if we select none, what we want to do is we want to decide, okay, we have 2 things that we got to decide. So let's assume that we always want the edit boxes to be blanked out. We're not going to bother to check if something's in them or not. So if we do the preset to none, even if there's something typed in here, it's going to get rid of it. So if you were working on something and then you hit preset 1 or 2 or none, then that's your fault. You blanked it out. So this is something that you got to keep in mind. Like you're probably not going to use edits for your presets, but you could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it so that way if any of these checkboxes are checked, they're going to become unchecked. The radio, I'm going to have it set back to its default, which I have set as the first radio. The options here, I've never actually tried blanking them out, but I'll show you how you can blank it out, and maybe that might work for you for something. But we'll look at first setting it back to option 1 and number 1. So let's go through that to begin with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop for the checkboxes. I'm going to loop 6 times because we got 6 checkboxes. And I'm just going to use GUI control. GUI 1, and because I named all my variables a name that I can loop through as a pseudo array, I'm just going to do that. Check a index. If you're not familiar, because my loop only is only going to contain 1 line, I don't need to add in the braces. If I had more than 1 line, I would have to add them in, but because it's just going to be the 1 line, I don't need to add them. And what are we going to do? I'm going to set these all to 0. So if any of these checkboxes are checked, which means they have a value of 1, I'm going to reset them to 0. Next is the radio buttons. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the first radio button checked. GU here, I'll add a white space so that way it separates those. And that's rad, right? Yes, variable is rad. And I'm going to set it to 1. I've never tried this before, so I better check to make sure it works. I've never tried it with radio buttons, so I'll select 3, I'll hit none, and there we go, it selected it. Okay, so that's that one. Next is the drop-down list. So this one's a little bit different than those other ones, but it starts off the same. GUI control, window 1, and instead this time we are going to use a subcommand, and the subcommand we're going to use is choose. And we are going to be choosing our variable that we called list1 for the drop-down list, and we are going to be choosing option 1. Alright, so let's go ahead and run that. I'm going to select option number 4, so option 4 is selected, and then I'm going to hit none, and it's going to change option 4 to option 1. There we go. We can also do it, like I said, I've never tried this in an actual script or whatever, but we can also set this so that way it doesn't have any selected by having 0. So by default it starts off at option 1, but if I hit none, it's going to blank that out. But like I said, I've never tried actually running anything with this, so I don't know what would happen. But I mean, I'm using a list. I obviously have something that's pre-selected by using the double pipes. If I didn't want to use the double pipes, perhaps I could add an extra space in here. Let me see. I think that if I run this like this, I think this will give me a blank one up at the top. Maybe. It's been a while. Yeah, so it gives me by default, if I don't have it selected on 1, it gives me that blank one to begin with. So all we're really doing by having it zeroed out is as if we didn't select anything in our options list or in our drop-down list here. So that's the same as that, doing that there. So we'll zero that out. We'll also zero this out. So I called this one list 2, so our list box has the variable list 2 associated with it. So list 2, and I'm going to select 0. Once again, I've never tried this before, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so there, it deselected everything. So that, if that's an option you want, but then again, you know, you wouldn't have the double pipes with it. If you really want it, if you're going to use the double pipes to select one of these items to have it to be your default, then the thing you're going to revert it to when you're not using any of the presets is probably the thing that you have selected up here, which is number 1 and option 1. So for this one, okay, no, I'll deal with that after. I'm going to just leave them 0 for now. I'm going to leave them 0. That's fine. I'm happy with them being 0. Because I don't want to jump ahead. The last things are the edit controls. So if the edit controls have anything in them, we'll just blank them out. So GUI control, window 1, no subcommand. It's going to be edit 1, and we're not going to put anything in it, and then duplicate that for edit 2. So this should clear out. So if I type anything in these guys, if I select none as my option, it'll blank them out. Okay, so that's if we don't use any preset. So I'm going to collapse this down, otherwise it's going to get too hard to read. Next is if we use preset 1. So let's go through and create something for our presets. So I'm going to create I'm going to create for the checkboxes. Now, if I really want this to be really efficient, what I would do is perhaps name almost everything the same kind of name, and then maybe have a little bit of a number or so that it differentiates them. But because right now I'm going to create I'll create a list for all the check boxes, but if I had named the radio button, or if I think about it for a minute or two, I can come up with a way so that way I can loop through it really quickly through all my different controls. But for the moment, I'm just going to do the check boxes as their own thing. So up here, I'm going to create an array of my selected items. So I'm going to give them the values that I want them to have. So check, I'm going to call it check set 1. And this is just going to be an array, a simple array. Now I could hard code this just as easily because I only have a couple of things, but I'll do it this way. I'll do if I select set 1, I want checkbox 1 to be checked. I want checkbox 2 not to be selected. I want checkbox 3 not to be selected. I want checkbox 4 to be selected. I want checkbox 5 to be selected, and I want checkbox 6 not to be selected. If I select set 2, then I want the first checkbox to be 0, the second checkbox to be 1, the third checkbox to be 1, the fourth and fifth to be 1, and I'll do all except for the first one on 1. There. Okay, there we go. We got, and this is check set 2. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through them. Loop 6 times and update their new values. GUI control. Window 1. Check underscore a index, so the current index, or the control that has the name of the current index, which is 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. And I'm going to be updating it with the value of my array in the current index. So I have, what did I call it? Was it check set or set check? Check set. So check set 1, and we are going to be putting into it the position for A index. So as it loops through this, A index will start at 1, and then the next time it loops through, it'll be 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then that corresponds with a position within this array. So the first one, then the second one, and it's just going to update the value of those checkboxes with that. So that's the checkboxes. Next we have the radio. So the radio, if I use set 1, I want radio 3 to be selected. No subcommand. Rad was the variable, and I want 3 to be selected. Next is my drop-down list. Here I'm going to use choose. 1. And this is list 1 is the name of the variable associated with the drop-down list. And what I need is the actual string that I want to select. So if I have set 1, I'm going to have it set to option 3. So in here, I'm going to use option 3. With the list box, what I'm going to do, instead of having it the normal way of submitting, instead I'm going to use alternative submit, which is going to use its position rather than the name. So if I currently, in order for me to select any of these, I actually have to type out number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. If I use alt submit, I could use its position. So this would be the first one, the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one. So in the options for the list box, I'm going to do alt submit. And now, rather than having to type out number 3, number 2, number 1, I can just do the position. Window 1, we're going to be choosing. the name of the output variable is 2, list 2, and I'm going to be selecting, what do I want to select? Let's go with number 2. So I'm going to, because it's alt submit, I just need to use its position, so it's the second position. The last is the edits, so GUI control, window 1, no subcommand, edit 1 is the first edit, and what I'm going to put into it, I'm going to put in it the edit array first position. Need to force an expression, edit array position 1. With the second one, with the second edit control, I'll just hard code something. Window 1, no subcommand. This is edit 2. And I'm going to have it say hello. Okay, that's that. Let's do the last preset now. It's pretty much the same thing, so I'm just going to copy this and edit it as needed. So we're going to be using for the checkbox, we're going to use check set 2, which is that second array that I created. Radio, we're going to select it to be radio 2. We'll choose option, how many options do I got? 4. I'll choose option 2. For this one here, I'm going to do number 5. For the edit, I'm going to use the second element in my edit array. And this is going to say whatever, because that's probably what you'll be using it for, like some identification of some sort. Product ID, how many you got in stock, whatever, I don't know. I think we're good. I think we have it. And then after we run this, we'll go and look at how we can do with the list box. But other than that, we're pretty much done. So here we have presets. So if oh yes. I'm going to go back to here for a second. I'm going to go back to here because I want it to wait until I got to here to show that you have to type in the whole word and everything. Because other words, so up here, if we select none, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to having it whatever we have it set to begin with. So since I have the double pipes here for number 1 and I have the double pipes here for option 1, instead of zeroing these out, I'm going to do option 1, and here I'm going to do, since I'm using the position, I'll just do position 1. Okay, there we go. So if I hit set 1, it should set a bunch of these checkboxes, set the radio, set the drop-down list, set this, set the edits. Boom. Right, so there's a preset. So I got this one's checked, this one's checked, this one's checked, this one is not. Something is wrong there. You know what? Maybe this one's supposed to be choose as well. I've never tried. That might be what it is. So I'm going to try for the radio button. I might need to use choose. Hopefully it's something as simple as that. So preset 1, no. Huh. You know what? This might be a case of, because I'm using the same variable, it might be having a problem with that. So what I might actually have to do, I think I'm gonna have to do with the radio. It's a good thing that this happened. It's a good thing this happened. So instead of using a common variable for the radios, what I'm gonna do is this is gonna be radio 1. Here. This is going to be radio 2. This is going to be radio 3. And now I need to go through all of these things here because the values are going to be off because I'm going to be looking at 0 or 1s. So because if this radio was selected and then when I press this I want it to go back over to here, because that automatically deselects the other ones, I don't have to worry about looping through them and zeroing them out. So what I think I can do is I can get rid of this choose for the radio, and I think I can just select this value to be 1, and that should change it from anything else to being the first radio. And this is radio 1, I believe. Yeah, rad 1. So rad 1 has a value of 1. If preset 2, or if it's our preset, first preset, I'll get rid of the choose. This is radio 3, and it's going to have a value of 1. So the third radio is going to have a value of 1, because I remember before it was, because I was using a common variable, they all shared that same one, so it was their position in it that was being stored. So the first radio, the second radio, third radio. But now each of them has their own variable, so that each variable has a 0 or a 1 value. Same thing in the last one. Get rid of the choose. This is radio 2, and it's going to have a value of 1. Hopefully, knock on wood, everything's the way I expect it to be now. So if I hit preset 1, radio 3 should get selected. And there we go. Okay, so we fixed that bug, that problem. Option 3 was selected, and the second thing in our list was selected. We updated our first edit with the item that was in edit array number 1, which was called item 1. It could have been called whatever. And the last edit was set to a low. If I set the second preset, we should get a bunch of different checkboxes. So I think this one will be deselected, and all the other checkboxes will get selected. And radio 2 gets selected. Option 2 gets selected. The fifth item in the list box gets selected. The first edit gets filled with the item that was in edit array position number 2, which was called item 2, and the second edit got updated with product ID, blah blah blah. And if I default them, they all get set back to their defaults. Okay, now for the last thing is the list box. There's ways that we can have it so that way our list box can actually select multiple items. So the way we can do that is in our options. In our options up here, we're going to put an option, just the number 8. Alright, and now if I run this again, I can select multiple different items. But what this means is that in certain cases I'm going to have to zero things out. So the first thing I need to do is when I hit none, I'm going to zero everything else out and then select option, the first item. So I think I can do it this way. So I'm gonna duplicate this line here for list 2 is where I'm selecting. When I select none, it sets this to be the first. It used to set it to be the first position or the first number. So I'm going to duplicate this line, and instead the first time I do it, I'm going to set it to 0. This should hopefully, if anything is selected, it should zero them all out, and then it's going to select the first item. So we'll run that and test. So I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to hit none, and it should deselect everything except for the first item. And there we go. Okay, so I put 0 to 0 everything to clear it all out, and then I set it to select the one that I want. I'm going to do the same thing in the first preset. I'm going to take this line here for list 2 and setting it to 2. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that, and then the first time I'm going to 0 it. And then the last time I'm going to come down here to this line here that says list 2, select item 5. I'm going to duplicate that, and the first time it encounters is going to 0 it out. Now let's say, now this is a great thing that if I want to have more than one item selected in here, so I can think of it kind of like a checkbox, right? Where I can have multiple of these things set up in here. And even if this was like a mile long, like if I add more items to this list, it'll give me the same ability to scroll down, right? Just like the drop-down list. But I can select as many items as I want, and it takes up a lot less space than perhaps checkboxes do. So you might want to, you know, that's one of the things I like about it. So let's say instead of us just selecting one of the items, if we select it for preset 2, we'll have it select a couple of things. We'll have it set 1, 3, and 5. So I already have it zeroed, and then I'm going to duplicate that twice, and I'm going to set this to be 1, 3, and 5. So if I set the second set, it's going to select 3 items instead of just 1. So if I set 1, gives me all my options, my checkboxes, blah blah blah, and then it does that. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you found it informative. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them down below, and if I can answer them, I will. In other words, I think this pretty much covers it. It's just setting up presets. I'll take a second here and look over and try to think if I missed something, but I think we're done. Like I said, we're not coding in what they're going to be doing. Like maybe we can add a button and then it runs something, does something. I don't know. What do you want your script to do? I want this to do nothing. It's doing what I want it to do. I'll point out this last GUI submit because I added this early on. So if I comment, let's have a quick look at what's going on. So at the very end of this, before it hits a return, I'm going to add in a tooltip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it display what the value of checkbox 1 is. Check_1. Okay, so if we don't have this, we have it the first time. The first time is mostly to update our radio button that we selected. So we select the radio button. We want to make sure that the value of that variable called preset gets that value, because otherwise it's not going to be able to do these if statements. So that's what this first GUI submit. Then we actually go in through and update all these other controls. Now depending, some of them might have labels attached to them that will automatically get executed as you update certain things, so they might get some value, but in other words, we really need to, at the end, before we leave, we need to make sure that all these changes we have, they get it reflected in the variable. So even though I've said that list 2 is choosing position 0 or 1, 3, and 5, this variable doesn't actually know that yet. You may think that it does, but it doesn't. It doesn't know that those things have been selected. It looks like they're selected. I mean, I can see it's blue, I can see it's blue, I can see it's blue, but the underlying variable that's supposed to be holding that information, it doesn't know that those things are selected. So that's why we're doing this second GUI submit. So we'll check out, because checkbox 1 gets selected for set 1 and deselected, so we can tell from that. Okay, so if I hit none, what we should see is a 0 if I hit none. What I should see is a 0 if I hit none. Now, if I hit set 1, I believe checkbox 1 gets selected when I hit set 1. So what I should see is automatically, as soon as I do this, it should convert to a 1. And there it did. Let's see what happens if we didn't add this in. It will eventually do it, because each time we launch this, each time we press on one of these, it launches this thread and it does submit. So eventually, if we press it enough times, it's going to submit those values, but it's not going to do it the first time when we need it to. So if I hit set 1, it's going to give me a value of 0. But if I hit set 1 again, because it's triggering and it's updating again, then we're finally going to get the 1 that we're supposed to be getting. Right? So here it's supposed to be a 1 when I select it, but it's not. It's saying, even though it's selected, this is for this checkbox. Even though it's selected, the variable doesn't know that. It still sees a 0. So that's why we're doing this second submit there. So as soon as I press this one, it's going to give me a 1. It's going to give me a 0. It's going to give me a 1. It's going to give me a 0. Okay, that's it. Have a good day, guys. Peace.